voice from the crevice. My name is Mark, and this story happened to me 2 years ago in the Canadian Rockies. By nature, I love solitude. I enjoy going on trips alone, getting away from the noise of the city and sitting with myself. But after what happened, I think 1,000 times before heading out to any desolate place. The trip started out very normally. I decided to go to a remote area, about a 4-hour hike from the nearest road. This area is known among hikers for being rough and a bit dangerous, but the scenery is breathtaking. Deep valleys, dense pine forests, and grey rocky mountains piercing the clouds. I prepared my gear, a tent, a sleeping bag, food, water, and cooking equipment. The only different thing this time was that I brought a small voice recorder with me, because recently I had become interested in recording nature sounds. The sound of the wind, the trickle of water, and the chirping of birds. I wish I had never brought it. The first 2 days were absolutely wonderful. The weather was magnificent, and the sky was clear. I reached an area called Silence Valley, a name that fits perfectly. The place was so quiet you could almost hear your own heartbeat. No sound of birds, no sound of wind, a strange, heavy silence. I set up my tent on the edge of a small lake, its water black and freezing. At night, I felt a sense of unease. The silence was suffocating, as if something was watching me from among the trees. I told myself, "Don't be ridiculous, Mark. You're alone out here." On the morning of the 3rd day, I decided to explore a rocky crevice I had seen on the map, about a 2-hour hike away. The crevice was a narrow opening in the face of the mountain, like a deep wound. The weather had become cloudy, and fog began creeping through the trees. As I walked, I felt the ground beneath my feet change. The stones became sharp and broken. I reached the crevice, and it was narrower than I had imagined. I could barely fit inside. The rock walls towered high around me on both sides, cold and damp. And there, in the middle of that narrow crevice, I heard the sound for the first time. It was faint at first, like a moan or a distant murmur. I stopped in my tracks, trying to focus my hearing. The sound disappeared. I continued a bit further, and suddenly the sound returned. But this time, it was clearer. It was like the sound of crying, a baby's cry. Exactly. I felt a shiver run down my spine. How could there be a baby here? I was in the deepest part of the mountain, the furthest place from any human being. I tried to explain the sound logically, maybe a type of bird, or the sound of the wind whistling through the rocks. But my heart was telling me something else. I decided not to turn back. I kept walking for another 10 minutes, and the sound grew clearer. It was no longer just crying. It became a call, fragmented words. "Mummy, Daddy." The sound was coming from a single source, from the belly of the mountain, almost from underground. I went crazy. I raised my recorder and turned it on, recording something other than nature sounds for the first time. I recorded the scene, the grey walls, the thick fog, and that damned sound. Suddenly, the sound changed. It flipped from a baby's cry to the scream of a grown man, a terrifying scream full of horror and pain, as if someone was being skinned alive. The scream was so loud it echoed through the narrow crevice, bouncing off the walls. I felt terror freeze the blood in my veins. I threw the recorder in my pocket and ran. I ran as fast as I could among the rocks, stumbling and getting up, my heart nearly exploding from fear. The sound did not stop. It began chasing me. It got closer. I started hearing footsteps, fast footsteps behind me, on the broken stones. I emerged from the crevice, gasping for air, and the fog had become so thick I couldn't see more than 2 meters ahead. The footsteps behind me stopped abruptly. I turned around quickly, and nothing. Only the fog and the deadly silence. I returned to my campsite in a state of collapse. I gathered my things as quickly as possible, and without thinking, I cut the trip short and descended. The matter did not end there. 2 days after I got home, I thought, let me listen to the recording. Maybe I could find an explanation. I connected the recorder to my computer and listened. At first, the sound of the wind and me walking, then the sound of my footsteps on the stones, and then silence. A long silence. And suddenly, I heard the sound. But in the recording, it was different. It wasn't a baby's cry or a man's scream. The sound was whispering, very slowly, in a language I don't understand, but it was directed at me. I felt the words creeping from the speakers directly into my mind. The worst part, my own voice. My own voice on the recording, whispering, Mark, don't walk, stay here with us. I shut off the recording and pulled back. I am 1,000,000% sure I didn't say a single word while I was there. Absolutely sure. But my voice was recorded. That night, I slept with the light on. A week later, I went to a psychiatrist. He said to me, the mountains have places that play tricks on the mind. Sounds echo in strange ways. But I know the truth. In that crevice, something was talking to me. Something was imitating me, and it was waiting again for a visitor, alone. I will never forget that scream and my own voice whispering in the darkness. My name is Daniel, and I'm a professional mountain climber. I've climbed the Alps, the Himalayas, and dozens of other difficult peaks around the world. Fear for me is a relative concept. I've learned to control it. But what happened in the Carpathian Mountains in Romania a year ago broke every rule of fear I ever knew. I no longer fear death. I've come to fear something else, something much deeper. I was on a solo expedition to explore a new, obscure peak called Vârful Alb, which means the White Peak. The Carpathian Mountains have a special character. Their forests are dense and ancient, and they are full of legends. The locals warned me, do not go alone. There is an evil spirit on the mountain. I laughed that day. But now, as I tell you this, I am not laughing at all. I started the climb on a clear day. The mountain wasn't technically difficult, but it was incredibly desolate. No birds, no animals, even the wind was still. The higher I climbed, the more I felt a weight, as if the mountain itself was pressing down on me. While I was climbing a narrow, rocky passage, I spotted something strange. About 50 meters away from me, on a protruding rock ledge, there was a person. I couldn't believe my eyes. I raised my small binoculars and focused. It was a man wearing a very old climbing suit, the type used in the 1970s. His suit was torn and dirty, and his climbing rope was frayed and cut. He was standing on the ledge, still as a statue, staring at the rock wall in front of him. I waved my hand and shouted, "Hello, are you okay?" He didn't move. I shouted a second time, no response. I felt worried. I thought maybe he was injured or had been stranded for days. I decided to change my route and head towards him. The climb was slower than I expected. The rocks were smooth and slippery. After a full hour of effort, I finally reached the rocky ledge. I stood up and wiped the sweat from my forehead. No one was there. The man had vanished. The ledge protruded about 3 meters, and there was no place to hide. Directly below it, hundreds of meters of air. The rocky ground was completely empty, except for one thing, an old climbing rope. It was tied to a rock, but it was so frayed it would crumble if you touched it. The rope hung in the air, disappearing into the fog beneath the ledge. I leaned over and called out, "Is anyone there?" My voice echoed in the valley in a frightening way. And then I heard a reply. It wasn't from below, it was from behind me, from the solid rock wall. A faint, hoarse voice, like someone who hadn't spoken in years. "Help, please." I froze in place. I realized the sound was coming from the mountain itself, from between the rocks. My face was centimeters from the wall. I slowly raised my hand and touched the rock. It was cold as ice. Suddenly, the old tied rope shook. It shook violently, as if something very heavy was holding onto it from below and trying to climb. I stepped back quickly. The rope started rising, meter by meter, on its own. Something was climbing, but I saw nothing at its end, just the empty rope. The fear I felt at that moment cannot be described. It was a fear stemming from the realization that what was happening defied all logic. I started backing away to attach my own ropes and descend as quickly as possible. But as I backed up, I noticed something with the tips of my fingers. A handprint. It was a human handprint burned into the rock, as if a hand had placed itself on the smooth rock and pressed with inhuman force, leaving a carved imprint of 5 complete fingers. The print was hot, a faint steam rising from it in the cold air. I didn't wait any longer. I descended that mountain in a state of sheer panic, almost flying. I didn't stop until I reached the base. I told the local authorities about the stranded man, but they looked at each other in strange silence. Finally, one of the old rangers spoke. "You saw the alb. It's the spirit of a lost climber from 1972. The man fell and died on this mountain, and since that day, he has been trying to climb up, trying to ask for help from every passing climber. Those who tried to help him, the man stopped." "What happens to them?" I asked with a trembling voice. "No one knows, but many climbers have disappeared from that exact wall. They were never found. It is said that if you touch his hand, you will take his place, stranded forever between life and death." I left Romania the next day. I sold all my equipment. Now, if you ask me if I believe in ghosts, I will tell you. I believe in places. Places that absorb human suffering and create something else out of it. In the Carpathian Mountains, on the ledge of Varfel Alb, that climber is still there, waiting, calling, trying to climb with his broken rope. And if you go there, don't look behind you. Ever. My name is Emma, and I'm a photographer. My specialty is desolate and eerie landscapes. I always travel to remote places to capture unique shots. A year ago, I decided to visit the Andes Mountains in Chile, focusing on photographing a rare mountain lake called Laguna Negra, or the Black Lake. The small village at the foot of the mountain warned me, don't go up if the weather is cloudy, and don't approach the lake in the fog. Of course, as usual, I thought these were just local superstitions. The hike was exhausting. I started early in the morning with the sky blue and clear. I carried my camera, my lenses, and my gear on my back. The scenery was stunning, snow-capped mountains reflecting the sunlight. But I noticed something. The mountain was very quiet. No sound of birds or insects, just the sound of my footsteps. After 2 hours, suddenly, thick black clouds covered the sky, and a heavy white fog began to form around me with astonishing speed. In less than 5 minutes, I could no longer see anything more than a meter ahead. I decided to stop. I took out my compass, but the needle was spinning wildly. My phone, of course, had no signal. I called out loudly, but my voice was strangled in the fog, as if it was swallowed. Suddenly, I heard footsteps. Fast, short steps, like the footsteps of a small child, circling around me in the fog. "Who's there?" I screamed. The footsteps stopped. Then I heard a sound, like tapping on stones. A slow, rhythmic tapping. From the heart of the fog, I began to see shadows. Small shadows, none taller than a meter. They were moving quickly at the edges of my field of vision. I grabbed my camera, and this was recklessness on my part. Instead of fleeing, I started taking pictures. I raised my camera while trembling, focusing on the movement of the shadows, and suddenly one of them stopped. I aimed my camera at it, and through the lens, I saw it. It was a small, humanoid shape, but deformed. It was a dark grey colour, as if made of mud and stones. It had no clear features, just indentations where eyes and a mouth should be. It stood staring at me, or so I felt. I took a picture. The sound of the camera echoed through the place, and suddenly, all the shadows froze. Then they moved. All of them at once headed towards me. I ran. I ran as fast as I could among the rocks, blinded by the thick fog. The shadows were fast. I could hear their tapping on the rock behind me, and overlapping whispering sounds I couldn't understand. I stumbled and fell. The camera flew from my hand and shattered on a rock. I got up quickly, and suddenly everything stopped. The tapping disappeared, and the whispering vanished. I looked around and found myself on the edge of the black lake. The lake was completely still, like a mirror, and the fog covered its surface. I caught my breath and approached the water. Its color was a deep black, even though it was surrounded by snow. I leaned over to look at my reflection. I saw my face. It was pale and terrified. But my reflection moved. My reflected face in the water smiled. A wide, cold smile. And I was not smiling. I froze in place. My arm in the reflection slowly raised and pointed a finger upwards to the sky. I looked up quickly. There was nothing there. When I looked back at the water, the reflection had returned to normal. But my face was wet with tears I hadn't felt. I retraced my steps in a state of shock. I never recovered from that trip. When I reached the village, I found the camera's memory card was still intact, despite the camera being destroyed. At the hotel, I inserted it into my laptop to see the pictures. All the photos were corrupted, just white fog. Except for the last one. The picture I took of that small thing was clear, but it didn't show a grey shape. It showed something else. In the place of the shadow, there was a young boy wearing torn clothes from the last century, and his face was full of scratches and wounds. His eyes were hollow and black, carrying an expression of infinite pain. Behind him in the photo, there were dozens of them emerging from the fog. I asked an old woman in the village about the history of the place, and she said, 80 years ago, a school bus crashed in the mountain and fell into the valley. All the children died. Their bodies were never recovered. Their spirits now live in the fog, searching for a way home, but they are lost forever. Now, every night, I see that boy with his empty eyes in my dreams, and I wake up to the sound of tapping on my window glass, even though I live on the 7th floor. They know that I photographed them, and they know where I live. Never go to Laguna Negra on a cloudy day. And if you hear the footsteps of small children in the fog, run. Run and never look behind you. Ever.